All right. So tell me what that teacher did effectively to set up the lesson.
Well, first of all, she had them sitting in a specific area. So she would say, sit behind the tape. And then just getting kids prepared, like get the talking out now so we don't have to deal with it during the lesson.
Mm-hmm.
And then she started to model with the carpet. So they were looking at the carpet and she said, what is this? It's a tin frame. Like it's a life-size tin frame. And then, so she modeled with the carpet and she asked, why are we doing this? Which you guys are always like, tell them why it's important for us to like learn
that conceptual understanding.
Or like, how will the tin frame help you? And then the teacher was like physically modeling herself, so she was in the tin frame like stepping and saying that there's however many in box.
Showing them how they were going to move once they got up and did it.
And then asking them how many's in the top, 5, how many's in the bottom, 5. So she's like, how do we know, like how does it help, what does it help us do, does it make counting easier? And they're like, yes. But then something you always told me to do is use the kids to model for them to be able to understand better too, which she did.
Tell me more about that part.
So I wrote down that she used the students to model how to count the tin frame. And then she used real life situations with the students as like counting and like trying to figure out the missing parts of the tin frame. So she's like, how many students moved to a buddy classroom, like whatever that classroom was? How many students went to Spanish? So using like what they do in everyday life at school to help them learn how to like count and find the missing number.
Absolutely. So then before we get to the end of her lesson, I agree with everything you said. And so before the kids even came, she already had the entire lesson set up. And because she had tape on her carpet with the tin frame, she had clearly thought through her lesson and then internalized that lesson. So she knew exactly what she was going to be doing. Another thing she did was make sure she had everyone's attention before she moved on. And like you said, she began the lesson with probing questions. You know, like, what is this? Why do we have it? And then why is it important? And how can we use this to help us? You know, and so like really getting the students to do a lot of critical thinking before they even get into math, which is important because, again, that goes to that conceptual understanding. Why am I using this darn tense frame? Because if you ask all of your students, Jeremy, why is it important to use a tense frame, or how is it going to help them in their life? Do you think that all of them would be able to articulate that to you? Out of your classroom, how many students would be able to tell you that?
I would say at least 85%. There may be a few where it's like some like random reasons why, but I think for the most part they know it's supposed to help them count. So
do they know it's supposed to help them count because you guys are just doing it, or do they know that because you've explicitly taught them the why?
I think we could hit more on that, like that explicit instruction and why we're doing it, because they also don't understand that, like, if there's 2 tin frames and one's filled up, like, they don't understand that that's already 10.
Right.
So you don't have to, like, do the extra, like, counting. Like, that's 10, just start from there and then count the other ones.
And that was her point in saying, so how many is at the bottom? How many is at the top? 5. So we don't need to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Right.
We can just go 5, 6, 7. And if they really conceptualize a 10 frame, they would already know, all right, it's 10 there because I know there are 10 you know, things in a 10 frame. So then let me just add on to that 10. So that's the part we really need to teach into.
I think we struggle with that.
That's weird. Okay, so now let's go to the end of the lesson. How does she stamp the learning in? I see you have check for understanding for things.
Yeah. So she was checking for understanding, but like the main thing of what she wanted them to like realize is that the 10 frame makes counting easier, and then the finding the missing part of the 10 frame. Like those are the main 2 things I took from the whole thing.
Right, exactly. And so what does her letting the students know? So that's what we're doing in math today. We're finding the missing part. How does that help the students? Because she had already gave it was like a 7-minute and 22-second mini lesson. And then she went back and said, so that's what we're doing in math today. We are finding the missing part. So what's the I can statement?
I can find the missing part of the 10 frame. Absolutely.
And so, but why is that significant and effective in her lesson?
I mean, I think like teaching 10 frames, we want to be able to teach them without them like trying too hard.
Mm-hmm.
Like, where they can just look at it and they know what the number is.
It's supposed to be easier.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what she was trying to like do with that. Does that make sense? Did I not answer the question?
Yes. So say that again. So how is her revisiting what the I can statement is? How is that effective with student learning?
Oh, because they need to know exactly what they're supposed to be able to do by the end of the lesson.
And what if they don't?
Then you would have to reteach.
Right. Or they would just be completely lost the whole
right.
time. Like, what is the purpose of me doing this? Why am I doing this activity? All right. So now we're going to watch your video.
Jeez.
And we're only going to watch about 4 minutes. We're going to watch 2 minutes of your setup and then 2 minutes of your ending. And so I want you to look back at what you said you would do with this, with your I can statement, which was what?
Which was I can decompose and compose shapes, and I can identify and sort shapes by common attributes.
Okay, so thinking about that, thinking about what you wrote, saying what you would do differently and how you would set that up, let's go ahead and watch your video and think about some things that you saw this teacher do well that you might not have done in your lesson. And let's go ahead and name those.
Okay.